Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, our first episode of season 5 of For What It's Nerd. You guys will note that I was saying that we will come back in the end of last season to discuss Stranger Things before the new year. That didn't happen because I actually didn't realize that the last episode was releasing on New Year's Day. So I thought rather than doing an episode on 3 episodes and then doing an episode on 1 episode, albeit it being the length of a movie, I thought I'd just do it all together as the first episode of the new year. So, hello, I'm here. I didn't let you down. I decided to shift gears a little bit on this one. It also gave me some time to relax over the holidays and do some other things. So that was good as well. But we're back, and I don't know what to tell you. I was pretty strong on Stranger Things the first 4 episodes, as you guys can probably saw from the video I put out on it. I thought those first 4 episodes felt very Stranger Things. There was a lot of very fun moments. There was a lot of interesting plot points, even so late as season 5 to introduce, especially regarding Will, what was going on with the government again, and there was a myriad of other things to consider as well. And then kind of here we are now that it's all finished, and that interest went down the went down the pan instantly. I don't even know where to start. So I actually wrote notes for this. I don't usually write notes, as you guys know, but I felt like there was a lot to cover for this. Now, I want to say I didn't not enjoy my time watching these episodes. Episodes 5, 6, and 7 were passable. They were okay, but you started to see where it was sort of leading, how the ending wasn't necessarily going to be as satisfying as maybe we wanted or hoped for. But at the same time, I didn't disenjoy them, and actually, I didn't. When I was watching it, I didn't not enjoy a number of parts. I mean, I actually found some parts of the finale to be quite well put together, despite the fact that they didn't really fit in with the Stranger Things mythos, and like it looked okay at parts, and there was some parts I want to say straight out of the gate that I didn't like. I'm not like sitting here absolutely hating my life, like devastated at the way the finale went, because like I can move on. I'm moving on. Like it was okay. I'm a late comer to Stranger Things, and I wasn't as a big a fan of it as maybe other people are. So I think I'm generally okay with it being, well, generic, and that kind of is my first point. I think the thing that I really enjoyed about Stranger Things compared to other more recent, more modern franchises, let's put it that way, is that it was sitting in a space that really no one else was occupying, and that was like this kind of mid-ground between what was sci-fi and what was magic. And it kind of was referenced in the season itself, season 5, this idea of the shield generator, and is it sci-fi, is it dark magic, what is it? And they were kind of like bouncing back and forth between that, and almost giving that kind of, like they've said themselves, kind of almost just bordering into like a Lovecraftian sort of area, but like not. It's like just bouncing between these 3 kind of different like almost horror, almost sci-fi, almost fantasy, but never quite hitting any of them, and sort of bouncing in that middle space. And I think they lost that in the end. I think they lost that with the finale, because I think what they ended up doing was going in for generic big boss battles, so to speak, and they even sort of referenced that in the episode as well. It felt very, do you know what? It felt very kid throwing their toys. Like, not throwing their toys, but like playing with their toys. Because it felt like you've got big bad monster over here, and then little guys over here, and the little guy's always going to win because the little guy is the kid playing. That's what it felt like. And it actually feels like that's what the Duffer Brothers were doing here as well. It felt like they didn't really want to lose any of the pieces off their board, but also they were kind of making it into a big kind of mess. It felt like they were trying to pull everything they'd ever done together, like the Mind Flayer being such a relevant part of the end, but this being this big, as a lot of people are knowing online, kaiju, essentially, that they're fighting, and the fact that no one even gets injured by that. And that's another point we'll talk about in a minute. But the fact that no one gets injured by that, no one gets killed, no one. The Demogorgons aren't even there. The things that like set this show in motion, the Demogorgons and the Demodogs, aren't there, aren't around, aren't involved at all. Like, what the thing that was Stranger Things. Essentially, like if you were to say what Stranger Things, you think of that straight away. Like that was a very Stranger Things element, and so for them to lose that and kind of fall into generic sci-fi, that battlefield at the end, I've noted to a few people, looked like the finale sequence in The Flash, like CGI slopland. Like it was just an arid desert with loads of people fighting a thing and nothing of interest else around. I genuinely think even if they changed the world to be something a little bit more intriguing and kept everything else the same way, and it wasn't just this arid, barren wasteland, and it was more like Spore-like or more, dangerous in some way rather than just being barren, I think it would have been better. I think it would have. Like that element of like think of it like this, kind of like when they were in the old research lab and you've got all the vines everywhere and stuff like the rest of the Upside Down. If it was like that in the Abyss, and it was like all encroaching on them, and they were like instantly you get this more eerie feel. Right, a desert doesn't give that, so you lost kind of all attention, and like you basically put them in the middle of a generic sci-fi ending in every kind of sense of the word, and I really didn't like that. I didn't feel like it served them at all, and I feel like that cut a lot of the tension pretty quickly because you knew sort of how everything was going to go. And that sort of coming to the second point on what I was kind of talking about a little bit there was that no one was getting injured, no one was getting killed. They tried to fake people out with Steve falling from the tower. They tried to fake people out with Hopper shooting Elle, but we knew almost instantly, like I kind of knew as soon as the cut to black happened for Steve that he wasn't dead, because there was be no point cutting to black to then see his body on the floor like 2 seconds later. So the cut to black was to try and get you scared that he might die, and then for them to not do it, essentially. And then with Elle, that's not going to happen because that's like their star character, so to speak. That's their like baby in this universe. They weren't going to kill her off in the final episode after like letting her live throughout the whole show, until of course they decide to do it on their own terms later on, which again I'll kind of circle back to because there's stuff to discuss there as well. But the fact that no one died in this season is troubling to me, because I think a lot of people in media now, they like it's like it is like a kid with their toys, going back to that analogy. It's people, they like their specific toy and they don't want to lose their specific toy, so they keep it alive and keep it puppeteering it, and it feels like people don't like seeing death in fiction now, and like death is the only thing that makes the whole thing worthwhile, the stakes of it worthwhile. Think of like, and this is why a lot of people were dismayed when Robert Downey Jr. was cast as not as Iron Man, as Doctor Doom, is the fact that like does that undermine the stakes of Tony Stark if we find out something in Doomsday that sort of undermines Endgame or whatever, The whole pivotal point of that movie is around Tony Stark sacrificing himself for humanity. That's the whole, like, that's the big point. And the fact that there was no do-overs, there's no comebacks, he's dead, is what mattered about that movie. That's why that mattered. That's why people say it's a great movie. People will always reference the I Am Iron Man and the finger click. There's other moments very similar in fiction, in media, where if a character didn't die, the story wouldn't sit right. Like Uncle Ben. Imagine if we just decided that Uncle Ben never died in Spider-Man. Again, I'm using the Marvel example, but Batman as well. If his parents never died, then he wouldn't go on the path that he was on. If in the same universe, if Jason Todd never died, then you don't get Red Hood as a character, and you don't get to kind of play with all those ideas. And yes, that's a resurrection, but that's a resurrection done with where you come back and there's a less part of yourself. You're not the whole part of yourself. And so that's almost kind of like, when people do clinically die and then come back, but they are different. They're changed somehow. They've seen something on the other side, or they realize how short life is, or whatever. Obviously, there can be trauma to that as well, the other side, but which is more what Red Hood kind of has in a way, but because of the Lazarus pit. But you know what I'm getting at. The idea is death is as fundamental to life as anything else, and to keep excising it from our media, we're based like life is meant to like art is meant to imitate life, and if we cut out one whole process part of life, then it becomes less intriguing and less interesting. I'm not saying that everything that's ever made has to have death in it, and I'm not saying that everything that is high stakes has to be about death specifically. But even, I know it sounds stupid, but even a long jump like what Elle does in this show, like a long jump across an area, right? You're meant to think in your head, oh, could they get injured? Oh, could this happen? Oh, could that happen? Could they be battered away? Elle makes this whole jump from one end of the desert to the other, into the, like, not the morgue, because it's beneath, but into the mine flare, and does that without being injured once. Not even like just rolls in there and is straight up, cuts Vecna down and just continues on. And it just felt like there wasn't even a single scratch, a single broken bone, and like that's death too. I know that sounds stupid to say, but someone being hurt is almost the same. You know, the stakes, and again, talking to people about this, and like the stakes of prior seasons have been higher. Chrissy dying in season 4, Max dying at the end of season 4. You know, earlier seasons with Max's brother and Billy and other characters as well. Barb right back in the original season. Like that was kind of what was so interesting about the show. It was how do you explain all these strange goings on in this small town? And then like this season, they start kind of giving some of that. They start like the actual fight at the Mac was more potentially dangerous than the end fight, because you have all these soldiers dying around, you have people trying to get out, and the only way that they get out is because Will exerts his powers. And yes, everyone survives that too. No one's hurt in that either, but it felt more earned because there was people dying around them. And yes, they're not main characters, but like it adds to the battle. I think the fact that the military also didn't even feature into the final showdown, so to speak, was a miss. I feel like if the government and the military were part of that last fight in the abyss, they'd somehow gotten there too. That could have changed things, especially if they were somehow used against if Vecna had somehow manipulated both sides to gain what he was trying to gain, and we got closer to, or even like infinitely, like that was also a thing as well. Once the area stopped moving, I don't know why I've got a pen in my hand for those watching on YouTube. Once the abyss stopped moving towards the upside down / Earth, it just stopped. It like there was no threat of that starting again. There was like that just stopped. The threat was that the top part of the pole came crashing down, and then like that was it. So like, yeah, I don't know. I think there was certain things that kind of were wrong with this season, and there's definitely more to discuss. But I think the worst, most egregious thing is the lack of ability to allow characters to face some kind of consequence for actions. And not just that, but also the fact that certain characters didn't even get moments together, or moments to process, or moments to do anything. There was whole scenes that Joyce was in that was pointless, her being there because she wasn't speaking or wasn't doing anything. There was whole scenes where characters wouldn't interact who have interacted and been sort of mainstays for most of the season. One that came to mind pretty frequently was that Robin and Steve had very little to do with each other this season. And I understand they were kind of angling more for Dustin and Steve to reconcile the Eddie scenario, which actually I think was, I didn't mind how that ended in the end. I know I said last time that I disliked the Eddie plot line in the first 4 episodes. I think that was actually something they did better in these episodes, which is hilarious because it was the one thing I said bad about the first 4 episodes. Now it's probably one of the few things I'm saying good about the last few episodes. Yeah, I think for me, the fact that like characters like Dr. K were there and kind of did nothing, the fact that Carly came back and was there to only be a dissenter and for everyone to tell her that she's wrong and then die wasn't particularly great. Like, she was the one death, and we don't even know if she died when she did die because then they changed things at the end of the show. But that's another thing. And just they were focusing on the wrong things for me. Like, I think some of the scenes in the show were too long, too unnecessary. I feel like there could have been longer given to the fight and less time on. I really don't feel like, I have to say this, I feel like the whole graduation bit was kind of superfluous to the point. In my opinion, I don't feel like any of that really added anything to the show. In my opinion, I don't feel like us seeing them graduate from school really did anything. I think the scene thereafter with Robin, Steve, Nancy, and Jonathan was okay, but still sort of superfluous. I feel like the only thing you really needed of that kind of ending part was the one with the guys on the table. I feel like that was a good kind of imagery moment to go back to their D&D table and kind of, you know, have that moment of discussing what happens at the end of the campaign. Like, it seems like a different campaign, admittedly, but what happens at the end of that campaign. And I get that. I get what they were doing with that. Not that I necessarily like what they did after that with the is 11 alive or dead? And that's not because it's ambiguous. I think an ambiguous ending can be quite good. I think it's because if other people had died in this finale and or been injured or something like that, and then you'd seen that potentially 11 was alive, it would be fine. But for everyone to survive, everyone to be okay, even Karen Wheeler, who was really almost mortally wounded, is sat there at the graduation with a few scars on her neck, and upper body, and then she's talking normally. Like, she's not even mute, or she's not even not even just one little consequence of everything that's gone on. I feel like that would have been okay if something had happened. The 11 thing would be less trite. But it feels trite because it feels like they've killed their toy and then said, right, but okay, but also we might bring her back. So, like, here she is again. So that was a little bit annoying to me. But yeah, another example of this. I think Will's coming out scene. Let's talk about that. I think that I don't think it's a bad scene. I don't think it was the best portrayed it could have been. I think it was overlong. But I think it was placed incorrectly in the show. I think I understand what they were going for, that Will could be at his strongest if he told everyone how, you know, what he was, who he is. But I feel like potentially that could have been done not before the final fight. I know that sounds stupid. I feel like almost maybe you did it at the beginning of episode 5. Or maybe you did it at some other point in the season. I know you'd have to change a few things around with Vecna, because the idea is that Vecna is forcing this out of Will in a way. He's kind of almost forcing him out of the closet. But I think the way they placed it right before the final fight was kind of... It felt weird, because I think everyone's like gearing up for this fight of their life, and then they're all suddenly taking 5 minutes out to have a conversation. It's not dissimilar to when in the episodes leading up again, you have Max and Holly having that whole conversation when they're right outside the portals to get back to their real world selves, that they just stand there for like 10 minutes. And it's like the reality starts to ebb away a little bit. I get those moments are important. I get that, like, there was an encouraging moment for Holly was important, and I get that Will coming out is incredibly important, especially in the current climate of the world. But I think it wasn't necessarily the best time in terms of story pacing to do that. What else? What else? So that's my notes on character, plot holes, and ambiguous endings. We already talked a little bit about ambiguous endings. Plenty of plot holes. A lot of people are asking a lot of things. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? What about this? One thing that I was thinking about a lot is the idea that this is a wormhole, and the Demogorgons was another big one. But for me, the wormhole thing I hated. I really didn't like that. I think it kind of just really didn't serve anything. It undermined. It went back to the generic sci-fi thing, but also it didn't even do generic sci-fi well, because like, to me, a wormhole does not work like that. There's no this part, then a flipped version of this part, and then a flipped version, and then the actual thing on the other side. That's not how a wormhole works. So now a wormhole's ever worked, as far as I've been aware, in fiction. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, they're allowed to do what they want and they're allowed to change it up a little bit, but it's because of the fact it feels so like thrust in there last second, and because of the fact it feels as though it's not a proper wormhole like another sci-fi, that it feels rushed and it feels tacked on. And there's other plot holes with it as well. Like, for example, right, how does the Upside Down have gravity and keep everyone's landing like sat there and stood there and whatever? And then you have the other side where you have Holly, as soon as she jumps through the abyss, through that crack in the ground, she's falling, and she falls straight down. Why is she not on the gravity of the Upside Down, of the abyss upside down, so to speak? So there's a few plot holes. The Demogorgons, of course, not showing up at all on the Abyss is also another one. And I'm going to link this in with my last point, actually, because I was going to talk about social media. And I think social media has been really bad for shows, and maybe even films in general, because I feel the media literacy in general is going down the drain. But then not just that, also the fact that it now has creatives, people who are making these shows, going on and like, they basically make the like compendium of things they didn't do in the show canon in a Twitter thread. There's like, I've seen about 10, 15 posts about the Duffer Brothers saying, well, this probably happened off screen, that probably happened off screen. Stuff about the play that was made that I didn't even know existed until recently. The Stranger Things play, and then like the fact that Henry Creel went to school with Joyce and Hopper, but they probably realized that off screen, and it's like, well, okay, what was the point of making anything? Like, if I'd watched that play, if I'd been someone who'd subscribed to the larger Stranger Things lore, and then I'd seen that something that I'd subscribed to was basically totally irrelevant because like they just decided not to include it, is wild to me. Like, I would be so annoyed. I talk so often on here about Star Wars canon books and how Dave Filoni has very often disregarded canon books, and it's frustrated me to no end. So with that, if anyone's annoyed about that, a Stranger Things super fan or whatever, I totally get it. It's very annoying when the supplementary material that you're meant to enjoy as a way of learning more about these characters is just a way of basically getting money out of you, because it doesn't actually, if they decide they don't like it anymore, they're going to change it. So I think social media is very bad, getting worse, I think, for a show that doesn't want to do it right, because then they can just explain about it later. You know, there was another example of like, we wanted to leave it ambiguous about whether Robin or Vicky were together still 18 months later. And it's like, why? What does that achieve? Like, why does that need to be ambiguous? Like, okay, what do you mean? It's just not. It's not. It doesn't serve anything. Oh, we thought we'd leave this ambiguous. The Dustin's romance from the other season, the girl who's speaking to her in the fall all the time, they probably broke off screen as well. Like, what? So everything's happening off screen. So what's the point? Even a reference to it is better than not saying it at all. Or like, nothing is said about it all season. No references, no discussion about it. Not like, doesn't have to happen in a scene necessarily, but offhanded comment is more than enough. Anyway, I feel like I'm ranting when really I don't care. And what I mean by that is, I do care about obviously good TV. I care about there being good shows to watch. I care about there being proper endings to shows, and I care about fiction in general. I do. But I think if you're so If you're so, I feel like they've been very self-congratulatory, and that's the concern. They've sort of they've done their victory lap before they even finished, and because of that, they think they've been very smart in terms of the ending that they've made, and it's not that at all. And in fact, it's sort of it's a parody of itself, and so why should we care about it if they don't care enough to put in the actual work to make it somewhat interesting? That's how I see it. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe that's being overly critical. I'm not usually that critical, but I feel like it does feel very self-congratulatory, and it feels like a kid in their toy box, and it feels like we've had to endure that rather than something that would have been a fitting end for a number of these characters. But you know, there's still more Stranger Things to come. More Stranger Things to come. They're doing a story set between. Sorry, I had like a little hiccup thing there. A story set between season 2 and 3, and then they're also looking at doing a spin-off, which I think is like kind of the peak of the ego to decide to do a spin-off before you even stick the landing of the original. But there you go. So we're going to leave it there before I start getting too critical. Thank you guys for watching as always, and welcome to season 5. Once season 5 ends, our season 5 begins. Exciting to be here once again for another new year of For What It's Nerd. I hope you guys will keep watching with me with all the new news coming out, all the new shows coming out. We've got Wonder Man later this month. I don't know what else we're going to be doing in the meantime. We might do another book review haul thing, because I haven't done one of those in ages, and I'm actually getting way back into my books, so that could be something you see soon. So keep an eye out. Thank you guys for watching, listening as always. I'll see you later. Bye guys.